The man who shot President Reagan will soon be a completely free man. Is that okay with you? I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green. This episode of Right Angle brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. Gentlemen, John Hinckley Jr., who shot President Reagan in 1981 and was found in 1982 to be not guilty by reason of insanity, had been under the government's psychological care for about 3 decades, and little by little, they started giving him more privileges. About 5 years ago, they gave him a conditional release. He went and lived with his mother. He was actually working in an antiques mall, but they were still monitoring him. Last year, the Department of Behavioral Services said that there's no reason to do that anymore and that he should have unconditional release. They said, and I want to get this quote correct here. Let's see. Department of Behavioral Services, or Behavioral Health rather, said he was a low risk for future violence. Hinckley Jr.'s attorney said his mental disease is in full, stable, and complete remission. What this will all mean is that starting at about June of next year, since the federal government has dropped its opposition to unconditional release, John Hinckley Jr., who not only shot President Reagan and nearly killed him, but shot James Brady, the press secretary, shot Timothy McCarthy, a Secret Service agent, shot Thomas Delahanty, who was a Metro police officer, all on that horrible day. He will be as free as you and me. Now, Stephen Green, I have to remind myself that he was not convicted. He was found not guilty by reason of insanity. In other words, he has a mental health problem. Like a physical health problem, it's been treated, and now he is going to have complete freedom. In fact, Steve, he's on YouTube. You can watch him play guitar and sing original songs he's written along with really bad versions of Bob Dylan songs. I wrestle with how I should feel about this. I mean, I remember what it was like to see the president being pushed into that limousine and to see 3 men drop around him as that happened. How do you feel about this, Steve?
I'm not old enough to tell you where I was when John F. Kennedy was shot. I wouldn't be born for another 6 or 7 years. But I was old enough to remember where I was when Reagan was shot. I was in the hallway of my elementary school. I was a 6th grader.
When Lincoln was did you say Lincoln?
Reagan.
Oh, I thought you said Lincoln.
No, I did say Reagan. I'm reasonably sure.
I'm sorry. Well, we'll review the tapes.
Yeah, we'll go back and check that. Flag on the play. I was in the hallway of 6th grade heading to a class, and some little kid, like a 2nd or 3rd grader, just told me the president had been shot. And I told them they were making stuff up. And sure enough, I get to my civics class or whatever they called it, and they pulled the TV in on the cart. For those of you old enough to remember when TVs were giant things on wheeled carts in our schools, and we proceeded to watch the news, and it was horrifying and horrible. That said, Scott, I'm really with you on this one. One of the hardest things to say in this business that we're in is I don't know. I don't have a good answer. But on this one, I really don't. Clearly, Hinckley was nuts, to put it in clinical terms. He was willing to get himself killed in order to kill the president and anybody around the president in order to impress a 19-year-old Jodie Foster. This is not what sane people do. I don't care how lonely and desperate you are. That's just not what a sane person does. So that part I understand. That part I get. So I don't know what the good answer is, but I do know for sure that even after however many years it's been of psychoanalysis and all these drugs we've created over the last 30 or 40 years, that we still don't have a handle on mental illness, not in this country, not in any other country. We don't treat it well when we treat it at all. If Hinckley, after, goodness, what is this? This is 40 years now. 40 years is considered treated. If we actually knew what we were doing, you'd think we could treat somebody in a lot less than 40 years. If you've had cancer for 40 years, you're dead. There's just no way. A broken bone heals in weeks. We don't know enough about the brain to really treat it. Even drugs for something fairly simple, or I should say comparatively simple, for depression are just not where we need them to be. We don't know what we're doing, and so there aren't any good answers. If after 40 years The doctors all say Hinckley's not a danger to anybody. I suppose we need to let him out. I just know that every time I have to think about that, my heart goes back to 1981, and it breaks my heart all over again.
No, and that's what President Reagan's daughter, Patty Davis, basically said. She can't get over that day. And meanwhile, President Reagan's son, Michael, said, listen, my dad forgave John Hinckley Jr., and I will do the same. And so he's kind of taking his father's perspective on that. The Reagan Foundation has said that anybody who shoots a president of the United States should never again be able to taste freedom and enjoy being able to walk out in public. And Bill, that raises an interesting question for me in that, is it different if you're insane and not guilty by reason of insanity and you shoot a president, should we treat you differently than if you're just a crazy killer who shoots your girlfriend and is found not guilty by reason of insanity? Is there a way to have a different standard there because of the recipient of the bullet?
Well, these are actually two separate issues, so let's deal with them separately. The real issue is, if you murder or attempt to murder a president, should there be a higher penalty for that than if you murder somebody who's not famous or important? Morally, I want to say no, these things are equal. The president is not more human than if you murder your wife or whatever. That person does not exist on some exalted moral plane, and so on. However, the argument that the Reagan Foundation puts forward is something I hadn't really considered before. And that is that there are undoubtedly a few people who'd like to kill me, a few hundred, maybe 10,000 on a good day.
No more than 10,000.
But when I'm putting that on, I'm calling a lid on 10,000. But I haven't done anything to make any of those people serious. And when you're the president of the United States, you now have suddenly, the second you're sworn into office, you now have millions of people who are actually potential legitimate threats. And that means you are putting yourself at a much higher risk. There's no question about it. If you're the president of the United States, from that moment forward, and really for the rest of your life, but certainly while you're in office, you have to live with the fact that anytime you step outside, there's a good chance that somebody's out there with a telescopic sight on you, and the Secret Service has done, by and large, a remarkable job of protecting the president, and not such a great job of the other things the Secret Service has done. So you could make the case that there should be something along the lines of what the Reagan Foundation said. It's got a nice ring to it. You take a shot at the president, you're going away, whether you hit him or not, and you're never getting out again. There's a deterrent factor to that I think bears some weight. The other issue is the insanity issue. And if we understand the insanity defense, and a lot of us have a very low opinion of the insanity defense only because so many people who are clearly not insane have tried to use it to literally get away with murder. But if the insanity defense is real, and it is, then basically we're kind of missing the point, because John Hinckley didn't shoot President Reagan. The mental character that lived inside John Hinckley's body did it, but that was a diseased individual who could not tell right from wrong. That is essentially the distinction that qualifies for the insanity defense. Could this person tell right from wrong? The jury found out that he could not, which means that he didn't do it in the sense that other people did it. If he couldn't tell what he was doing, then he didn't do it. That's why he was found not guilty by reason of insanity. So now we're down to the issue of, can this be cured? And clearly it can be. There are people living in Los Angeles, I get to see them pretty much every day, walking the streets who are openly psychotic. Openly, no question, openly psychotic, and threatening violence, and in some cases, many cases, committing violence. Those people, if they were treated, could then go about and be perfectly safe members of society, maybe limited in function, but they're certainly no threat to people if they're on their meds. So this logically tells me that, yes, if the insanity defense is true, meaning this person didn't know right from wrong because of a mental condition, and since mental conditions can be cured with therapy and drugs and so on, then yeah, parenthetically, I would probably say that 90% of Hinckley's recovery happened when he found out that Jodie Foster came out as a lesbian, but that's just me, and I'm not a professional psychologist.
You certainly are not. Ladies and gentlemen, this is such I came to this topic not knowing the right answer. And frankly, on the one hand, you want somebody who could possibly be a danger to anybody to be off the street so that they can't take a shot at someone. And I'm probably among those people who think that we have made much greater strides in the treatment of physical conditions than we have of mental conditions. And I lack a little bit of faith in the capacity of psychologists and psychiatrists and counselors to be able to unravel, the bundle of demons inside somebody's head. It's just, you're dealing with ephemeral things that can't be grasped. You can't just take a pair of tweezers and forceps and go in there and pull out the bad and throw that in a little pan and take it away and sew him back up. And so I'm skeptical about that. On the other hand, he's 66 years old. He's been in psychiatric care for 40 years, and he has been out now for about 5 years, apparently living in society at a limited level. And so maybe he's okay now. And I think I probably ultimately come down where President Reagan did. And this is kind of on a moral level. If the guy who took the bullet forgives the shooter, I can too. But the question here, Michael Reagan, is not forgiveness. It's safety. It's security for other people. And what a nightmare it would be if they let this guy out and this remission of mental disease that his lawyer claims that he has had ends, as cancer remissions have ended. And he goes back into that state and causes harm to somebody. There's no good answer to this, but I do think we need to wrestle with these questions, and we need to think about guilt and innocence in the context of a grasp that somebody has of reality at the time that they committed it. I've always thought, if I were ever accused of murder, I could say, well, I'm insane. Well, they say, well, what makes you say you're insane? Well, I killed somebody, didn't I? That's crazy. That's completely outside of the bounds of acceptable human behavior. So therefore, what I did declares me insane. That's not how they look at it. So I think it'll be interesting to watch how John Hinckley handles his freedom. He's out there in public. He's not trying to hide. He's on YouTube playing songs. What it's like living day to day, assuming you were the crazy person who was not yourself at the time that had happened, but this hand squeezed the trigger multiple times. You know that this is the body that was there when the president took a bullet and 3 guys dropped around him. It's still you, in a sense. How does he live with that? For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making Right Angle possible.